It doesn't matter whether you're a brand new shooter or in the LAPD SWAT team. If you violate a rule, you're going to shoot your gun without meaning to. All right, let's talk about firearm safety. So you're going to be learning to defend yourself and the life of other innocent people. And while doing that and while owning a gun, the last thing we want to have happen is you to make an error that causes harm to you or other innocent people, right? It would defeat the purpose of firearms self-defense training. So we're going to have a set of rules that help keep us safe. They are called the Universal Firearms Handling Rules, designed by a guy named Jeff Cooper way back in the day and perfected over the years. And that universal part means it applies to all people, all places, all times, all situations, all guns. It doesn't matter whether you're a brand new shooter or in the LAPD SWAT team. If you violate a rule, you're going to shoot your gun without meaning to. Now, luckily, the rules are redundant, okay? So we're going to have 4 rules, and they have redundancy built into them. So violating one rule at a time will cause you to shoot your gun possibly when you don't mean to, or cause you to embarrass yourself with your gun, but it won't cause harm to you or anyone else. You have to violate 2 rules simultaneously for it to actually cause harm to another human being. So that's the redundancy built into the system on purpose. Now, because we have redundancy built into the system and you know you can violate one rule without hurting someone, that doesn't mean you go ahead and violate a rule. We follow all 4 because we understand that humans make mistakes, right? We are likely to make mistakes, and we don't want that single mistake to be catastrophic, right? So universal firearms handling rules apply to all people, all places, all situations, all times. If you follow these 4 simple rules, you're going to do fine. If you have ever been to Hunter's Ed or anything like that, you might have learned like 20 safety rules. And if you remember back then, you couldn't remember them all. By the time you got to the end of the list, you couldn't remember what was at the start of the list. And they were very specific to situations. They, had specific rules for crossing fences or specific rules for taking a gun out of a car. That's not what we're doing. Our rules are principle-based. And they apply to all situations, and you should be able to solve all these specific situations like crossing a fence or taking a gun out of a car with those 4 rules. All right, so let's get into the 4 rules and how they apply. All right, let's talk about rule number 1. All guns are always loaded. All right, this is critical. It has to be the first rule. All guns are always loaded, right? Not the gun is sometimes loaded, or treat the gun as if it is loaded, or pretend the gun is loaded. All guns are always loaded. What that really means, all guns are always dangerous. That's what we want to keep in mind at all times. We can't make the gun safe. There is no safe gun. There's safe gun operators, right? We want our guns to be dangerous and, in fact, deadly. We want to be safe with them. We're going to do that by having the right mindset of all guns are always loaded. When you say something like treat or pretend, you're leaving a weakness. And then what ends up happening is at some point while handling your gun, you say to yourself, well, I know it's not really loaded, and therefore I can treat it a different way. And what this leads to is 2 different ways of handling a gun. It leads to the way you handle a gun when you think it's dangerous, and a way you handle a gun when you think it's safe. And that is going to take us down a bad path. When you have 2 different ways of doing something, you're easily going to be in the wrong mode at some point. All guns are always loaded. That's how we have to keep it. That is a statement of mindset, not a statement of fact, right? Your mindset is this gun is always dangerous. You see things where people will like unload their gun and show 3 people, and then suddenly they think they're able to treat it as if it's not a dangerous weapon. Not true. If you need to do something, if you need to demonstrate something that would be unsafe to do with a loaded gun, use a dummy gun. Use a fake gun to demonstrate those things. That is rule number 1. All guns are always loaded. Rule number 2, never point a gun at anything you're not willing to shoot. It's very, very simple. If you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot, the leg, the hand, the head, don't point your gun there, right? If you don't want to shoot someone else in the leg, hand, head or wherever, don't point your gun there. Whenever you read about a shooting in the news, a negligent shooting, they call it an accident, but we know it's almost always negligent. Whenever you read about these, they always want to ask in the article, how did this happen? Well, we know how it happened. If someone was shot with a gun unintentionally, what happened is someone pointed the gun at someone and then someone discharged the gun while pointed at them. It's very, very simple. The guns don't just go off by themselves magically, and they don't just aim themselves magically. Someone was doing it. Now, unintentionally, and we want to be intentional, right? That's why you're in class. We want to be intentional about where our gun is pointed. So never point your gun at anything you're not willing to shoot. If you're not willing to shoot your television or your car or a person, don't point your gun at them. Very, very simple. So we've all probably been in situations where someone has pointed a gun at us, be it a gun show or a gun shop or a friend showing you a gun, and they sweep it across you. And you may have said, hey, don't point that gun at me, please. And the first response you're always going to get out of these people is, don't worry, it's not loaded. Well, what did we talk about in rule number 1? All guns are always loaded. Okay, there are no safe guns, and therefore we don't point guns at things we don't mean to shoot. So that's very simple. It's rule number 2. And now we're going to move on to rule number 3. So rule number 3, keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are on the target. And what we really mean is to keep your finger in the indexed position. We're going to keep our finger indexed up on the slide of the gun. We don't want to even be down here on the frame of the gun where it's easy to slip in. We don't want to use the trigger guard. Most of them are not close enough to stop your finger from pressing on the trigger. We want to keep our finger off the trigger until our sights are on the target. Okay? Now, why do we need to do this? It's just too easy to unintentionally press the trigger. If your finger doesn't have an index position, a home base, and it's just floating around or worse, touching the trigger, then there are multiple things that are going to cause you to clench your hand down and shoot that gun when you don't mean to. We see this over and over again around the country in news reports, negligent shootings, people pressing the trigger because of things like startle reflex and inner limb interaction. So if you are startled by anything, it could be a sound, could be a touch, it could be visual, could be loss of balance, what's going to end up happening is your body is going to go into protective mode. It's going to pull the limbs in, pull the head down, raise the shoulder, and it's going to clamp the fists down, the hands down. And your hand is going to exert enough grip strength to press the trigger on any gun. So that startle reflex, and it doesn't have to be a loud sound. If you've ever jumped right out of your shoes just because someone whispered in your ear and you didn't know they were there, or you open a door and somebody was coming the other direction and you totally didn't expect someone, those things are startling. It's very easy to activate that startle reflex. Also, we have a thing called inner limb interaction. When you get under high degrees of stress, your body will start to move in mirror image, and you'll start to do things, and you'll see it. Now that you have heard this, you're going to watch videos, you're going to see it in action, that people will reach out and grab things, and they'll move the gun the same way. They'll move both hands, and when they grab this hand down, they'll press the trigger with the other hand. Inter-limb interaction happens under high degrees of stress. Obviously, a self-defense situation is going to be one of those high-stress situations. So by learning to keep our finger in the index position up on the slide of the gun, we are hopefully going to prevent either the startle reflex or the inner limb interaction from causing the gun to go off. So let's talk about rule number 4. Be sure of your target and what is behind and beyond it. So we need to know what we're shooting at and where the bullet's going to go. And we have to make a decision about whether we want to pull the trigger or not. This rule, like all of our rules, applies to all people, all situations, all guns, all skill levels. So that means it applies to the range, and it applies to self-defense situations, and it applies when you're dry practicing at home. Be sure your target and what is behind and beyond it. So when we are at a standard range, most of them are going to have you shooting on paper or cardboard. That is going to be the target that's allowed, right? So you should ensure that you have the proper kind of target for the range you're at. Some ranges are going to allow you to shoot at steel. They're probably going to have the steel, and they're going to have it set up so that it's only to be shot at certain distances from certain angles with certain caliber guns. That makes it safe enough, right? So when you are setting up your paper target, you're going to ensure that not only are you shooting the right target for the range, in other words, paper or cardboard, you're going to ensure that what is behind and beyond it is where the bullets are supposed to go. So if you set up your target and you're aimed in and you're looking at it and you're seeing the sky over the top of the outdoor range berm, you're not set up correctly, right? You should have the bullets going where you want them to go after they go through the target. So you shouldn't, indoor range, you're going to see the backstop, not the ceiling, not the floor, etc. behind the target. So be sure your target and what is behind and beyond your target applies on the range. It's also going to apply during dry practice at home. because we know that all guns are always loaded. You could have a negligent discharge while dry practicing. We want that round to not have catastrophic results, right? We want to know where our target is, what the backstop is, and have our dry practice set up so that it's completely safe, even if we were to unintentionally shoot the gun. Obviously, we don't want to unintentionally shoot the gun, but we accept the fact it could happen. In a self-defense situation on the street, you still have to know the target. You have to know what's behind and beyond the target, because you have to make a deadly force decision, right? And that deadly force decision is going to be a balance between how much danger is there to innocent life from the criminal and how much danger you're causing to innocent life while dealing with him, right? So you need to know and be pretty sure, right? And call it surety. You have to be sure that this is the guy, and you have to be sure about how much damage you're going to do to other innocent people. So be sure your target and what is behind and beyond your target. That is rule number 4.